The morning sun spilled through the tall windows of Crestwood High, a sprawling suburban school nestled in the heart of a quiet American town, its red brick walls and polished floors buzzing with the restless energy of a new school year. Students shuffled through the hallways, their sneakers squeaking against the tiles, voices rising and falling in a chaotic symphony of laughter, gossip, and the occasional groan about early classes. Amid the crowd, Jada Carter stepped through the front doors, for the first time her presence cutting through the noise like a blade through water. At 18, Jada was tall, her posture steady and deliberate, her dark skin catching the light as she moved, with a quiet confidence that seemed to draw every eye in the vicinity. Her braided hair was pulled back neatly, and her backpack hung loosely over one shoulder, the strap adjusted with the kind of precision that hinted at discipline. She was a transfer student new to Crestwood, and though she carried herself with an air of calm focus, there was something about her that felt different, something that made the whispers start before she even reached her first classroom. Students glanced her way, some curious, some skeptical, their murmurs blending into the background hum of the hallway. "Who's she?" one girl muttered to her friend, her tone laced with intrigue. "Looks like she thinks she's all that." Another scoffed, his voice carrying just enough to test her reaction. But Jada didn't flinch, didn't turn her head, didn't slow her steps. Her eyes scanned the hallway briefly, taking in the rows of blue lockers, the faded posters advertising school clubs, and the clusters of students sizing her up. She was used to this, the stares, the whispers, the unspoken challenge of being the new kid, especially a black girl in a school like Crestwood, where the social hierarchy was as rigid as the class schedules. Leaning against a locker near the end of the hall, Taylor Reed watched Jada with a predator's focus, her arms crossed and her lips curled into a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes. Taylor was Crestwood's self-appointed queen, a senior with a reputation built on sharp words and sharper actions. Her blonde hair was pulled into a high ponytail, and her designer sneakers gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a silent declaration of her status. She thrived on control on the way students parted, when she walked by, on the nervous glances thrown her way when she decided someone was her next target. Her crew, a mix of loyal followers and reluctant hangers-on, flanked her, their laughter loud and performative as they fed off her energy. "New girl thinks she's untouchable," Taylor muttered, her voice low but dripping with intent. Her best friend Kaylee snickered, tossing her hair. "Give it a week, Tay. She'll learn." Taylor's eyes narrowed as Jada passed by her steps, even her expression unreadable. There was something about the way Jada moved, not arrogant, not timid, but controlled, that set Taylor's nerves on edge. It wasn't fear she saw in Jada's posture. It was something else, something she couldn't name, and that alone was enough to make her want to break it. Jada felt the weight of Taylor's stare, but didn't acknowledge it. She'd seen girls like Taylor before, people who mistook cruelty for power, who thought intimidation was a personality trait. Growing up, Jada had learned to navigate spaces where she was underestimated, where her presence was questioned before she even opened her mouth. Years of Taekwondo training had taught her more than just kicks and punches. They'd taught her patience, focus, and the kind of strength that didn't need to be shouted to be felt. She adjusted her backpack and kept walking, her eyes catching a boy standing alone near the water fountain. His shoulders hunched as if he could make himself invisible. His name was Ethan, though she didn't know it yet. He was slight, with messy brown hair and glasses that slipped down his nose. His hands shoved deep into the pockets of his hoodie. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and Jada saw something familiar in his gaze, a quiet weight, the kind carried by someone who'd spent too long trying to disappear. She gave him a small nod, barely noticeable, but it was enough to make Ethan blink his shoulders, relaxing just a fraction before he looked away. The bell rang sharp and insistent, and the hallway surged with movement as students rushed to their first classes. Jada slipped into her English classroom, taking a seat near the middle, her notebook already open before the teacher even started speaking. The room was a mix of bored faces and whispered conversations, but Jada stayed focused, her pen moving steadily as she jotted down the day's assignment. Outside, the whispers about her were already spreading, carried by students who'd seen her walk through the hall like she belonged there. By second period, the buzz had grown louder, fueled by the kind of curiosity that thrives in a place like Crestwood, where new faces were rare and new challenges even rarer. Taylor, meanwhile, was in her element, leaning back in her history class, her phone hidden under her desk as she texted her crew. "New girl's gonna regret walking in here like she owns the place." She typed, her fingers quick and deliberate. The responses came fast, laughing emojis, suggestions for how to put her in her place. Taylor's smirk grew, but there was a tightness in her chest she couldn't quite shake. She'd seen the way Jada hadn't flinched, hadn't reacted, and it gnawed at her. Control was everything to Taylor, and Jada's calm was a direct challenge to that. By late morning, the atmosphere in Crestwood's hallways had shifted, the air thick with anticipation. Jada's presence was like a pebble dropped in a still pond, sending ripples through the social order. Most students kept their heads down when Taylor passed, their eyes averted, their voices hushed. But Jada didn't. She moved through the crowd with the same steady pace, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes scanning the faces around her without lingering too long. It wasn't defiance, not exactly. It was something quieter, more dangerous. It was the absence of fear. And that absence was what Taylor couldn't stand. During the break between classes, Taylor spotted Jada in the hallway, her books balanced neatly in her arms, her posture as composed as ever. Taylor nudged Kaylee, her voice low. "Watch this." She stepped forward deliberately, cutting into Jada's path, her shoulders slamming into Jada's with enough force to send her books crashing to the floor. The hallway erupted in gasps and stifled laughter, phones already out, screens glowing as students recorded the moment. Jada paused, her breath steady, then knelt slowly to gather her books one by one, her movements deliberate, almost serene. The crowd waited for a reaction, tears, anger, something, but Jada's face remained calm, her eyes steady as she stood and brushed off her jeans. "You're in my hallway now," Taylor said, leaning in close, her voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Don't forget it." Jada looked up, her gaze locking with Taylor's for a brief second. There was no anger in her eyes, no fear, just a quiet intensity that made Taylor's smirk falter. Jada didn't speak, didn't frown, didn't rush. She simply adjusted her books and continued down the hall, her steps as even as before. The laughter from Taylor's crew was loud, but it felt hollow, like they were trying to convince themselves the moment had gone their way. Ethan, still lingering near the lockers, watched the whole thing, his heart pounding. He'd seen Taylor's routine too many times, picking on the weak, the quiet, the ones who wouldn't fight back. But Jada wasn't like that. She wasn't weak, and she wasn't scared. She was something else entirely. And Ethan felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The cafeteria at lunch was a different beast. A sprawling space filled with the clatter of trays, the hum of voices, and the unspoken rules that governed who sat where. Jada found a table near the back. Her tray, simple: a sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. She ate with the same deliberate calm she carried everywhere, her eyes scanning the room without lingering. Ethan sat a few seats away, his own tray untouched, his fingers tapping nervously against the table. He wanted to say something to thank her for that nod earlier, but the words stuck in his throat. Across the room, Taylor held court at her usual table, surrounded by her crew, her laughter louder than it needed to be. She was performing, and everyone knew it. But her eyes kept darting toward Jada, her fingers drumming against her tray as she tried to shake the unease that had settled in her chest. The hallway incident hadn't gone the way she'd planned. Jada's silence, her refusal to react, had turned the moment into something else, something that made Taylor look smaller, not bigger. And that was unacceptable. The cafeteria buzzed with its usual chaos, but there was a new undercurrent, a tension that hadn't been there before. Students whispered about the hallway shove, about the way Jada had picked up her books, without a word about the look in her eyes that no one could quite describe. Some said she was scared, others said she was arrogant, but a few Ethan among them saw something different. They saw strength not in the loud, aggressive way Taylor wielded it, but in the quiet, unshakable way Jada carried herself. Taylor felt the shift, and it infuriated her. She needed to reclaim control to prove that Crestwood was still hers. Her eyes landed on a half-empty cup of iced coffee sitting on the edge of her table, the condensation dripping down its sides. She picked it up, her smirk returning as she stood. "Watch this," she said to her crew, her voice carrying a confidence she didn't entirely feel. The room seemed to slow as Taylor crossed the cafeteria, the cup in her hand, her steps deliberate. Conversations quieted, eyes shifted, and even the clatter of trays seemed to fade. Ethan saw her coming and felt his stomach drop. He leaned toward Jada, his voice barely a whisper. "She's coming for you." Jada looked up, her eyes meeting Ethan's for a moment before flicking toward Taylor. "Let her," she said, her voice calm, almost casual. She went back to her sandwich, taking a bite as if nothing was happening. Taylor reached the table and stopped the cup tilted slightly in her hand. Without a word, she tipped it forward, the cold coffee spilling over Jada's head, soaking her braids and dripping down her hoodie. The cafeteria erupted, laughter, gasps, shouts, phones raised high to capture the moment. For Taylor, it felt like a victory, a reclaiming of her throne. She stood tall, arms spread slightly, soaking in the attention. But Jada didn't move. She didn't jump up, didn't shout, didn't swing. She lifted her hand, wiped the coffee from her face with the sleeve of her hoodie, and stood slowly, her movements as steady as ever. The laughter faltered, the room growing quieter with each second. Jada locked eyes with Taylor, her gaze cold, but not angry, steady, but not vengeful. It was the kind of look that stripped away bravado without a single word. "You done?" Jada asked, her voice calm, almost gentle. The question hit harder than any shout could have, echoing in the sudden silence. Taylor blinked, caught off guard, her smirk slipping. She forced a laugh, turning to her crew. "Yeah, I'm done." But her voice cracked and the crowd noticed. Her friends didn't look impressed. They looked nervous, their eyes darting between Taylor and Jada. Ethan exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath. He leaned closer to Jada as Taylor walked away, her steps less certain than before. "How do you do that?" he whispered, his voice full of awe. "Stay so calm." Jada sat back down, picking up her apple as if nothing had happened. "Because she wants a reaction," she said, taking a bite. "I don't give her one." The cafeteria buzzed with a new kind of energy, now a mix of confusion, admiration, and the creeping sense that Taylor Reed had just lost something she couldn't get back. Jada ate quietly, her composure unshaken, while Ethan watched her, his mind racing with possibilities. For the first time in years, he felt like something at Crestwood High was about to change. The hum of Crestwood High had shifted by the time the next morning rolled around the hallways, alive with a restless energy that hadn't been there before. The video of Taylor Reed pouring coffee over Jada Carter's head had spread like wildfire not just through the school, but across social media, racking up thousands of views on platforms where students shared and reshared the clip, each post adding a new layer of commentary. Some called Jada weak for not fighting back. Others praised her for her unshakable calm, and a few whispered that she was dangerous, though no one could say exactly why. The clip looped endlessly. Taylor's smirk, the coffee splashing over Jada's braids, and that moment when Jada stood, wiped her face, and asked, "You done?" with a voice so steady it seemed to cut through the chaos. That question had become a meme captioned with everything from laughing emojis to theories about what Jada might do next. In the cafeteria, in classrooms and group chats, the story grew, each retelling, stretching the truth until it was hard to separate fact from fiction. But one thing was clear: Jada Carter was no longer just the new girl. She was a mystery, a challenge, and for Taylor Reed, a problem that needed to be fixed. Jada walked through the front doors of Crestwood High with the same deliberate pace as the day before, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her braids pulled back neatly, her hoodie replaced with a clean one. The stares followed her, more intense now, a mix of curiosity and caution. She felt them, but didn't let them settle her eyes, scanning the hallway with the same focus she brought to the Taekwondo dojang, where she'd spent years honing her skills. She wasn't here to make a statement, not yet, but she wasn't here to shrink either. Her training had taught her to read a room, to sense the shift in energy before it became action, and the hallway was electric with it. Students parted slightly as she passed, not out of respect, but uncertainty, their whispers trailing her like shadows. She didn't even flinch. One boy muttered to his friend. "Bet she's scared now, though," another said, though his voice lacked conviction. Jada kept moving her steps, even her expression unreadable. She wasn't here to play their games, but she knew the rules better than most. Taylor Reed, meanwhile, was unraveling. She stood by her usual spot near the lockers, her crew gathered around her, but the dynamic felt off. Her laughter was louder than necessary, her gestures sharper, as if she could force the world back into place through sheer will. The video had been a blow, her moment of triumph turned into something else entirely. Her smirk, now a punchline. She'd spent the night scrolling through comments, each one chipping away at the confidence she'd built over years of ruling Crestwood's social scene. "She's nothing," Taylor had texted Kaylee at midnight, her fingers shaking as she typed. "She's nobody," but the words felt hollow even as she sent them. Kaylee's response, a string of fire emojis, and "You'll show her," didn't help. Taylor needed more than emojis. She needed control, and Jada's silence was stealing it from her. As Jada passed by, Taylor's eyes locked onto her, her jaw tightening. "Look at her, walking like she owns the place," she muttered loud enough for her crew to hear. Kaylee smirked, but the others shifted uncomfortably, their loyalty wavering under the weight of the previous day's failure. In the corner of the hallway, Ethan watched the scene unfold, his hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets, his glasses slipping down his nose. He'd replayed the cafeteria moment in his head all night, the way Jada had stood up, wiped the coffee off her face, and looked at Taylor like she was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Ethan knew what it was like to be on the receiving end of Taylor's cruelty. Years of shoves, insults, and laughter had left him quiet, cautious, always looking over his shoulder. But Jada was different. She wasn't just enduring, she was choosing her moments, and that choice felt like power. Ethan wanted to talk to her, to ask how she did it, but the thought of approaching her made his stomach twist. Instead, he lingered near the water fountain, pretending to adjust his backpack, his eyes darting between Jada and Taylor. When Jada's gaze met his for a brief second, he froze, then nodded awkwardly, his face flushing. Jada's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but enough to make Ethan feel seen, like she understood the weight he carried without him having to say it. The first period bell rang and the hallway surged with movement, students scattering to their classes. Jada slipped into her biology class, taking a seat near the back, her notebook open, before the teacher even started. The room was a mix of bored faces and whispered gossip, the air thick with the aftermath of the video. A girl 2 seats over leaned toward her friend, her voice low but audible. "Did you see her face? She didn't even blink." Her friend shook her head. "I'd have punched Taylor right there." Jada ignored them, her pen moving steadily as she copied the diagram on the board. But the whispers weren't just about the coffee anymore. Taylor had been busy planting seeds of doubt, spreading rumors that Jada was trouble, that she'd been kicked out of her last school, that her calm was just a cover for something darker. The lies were clumsy, but they found fertile ground in a school hungry for drama. Jada heard the whispers but let them slide off. Her focus unbroken. She'd dealt with worse comments about her skin, her hair, her place in spaces where she was the only one who looked like her. Taekwondo had taught her to block out the noise, to focus on what mattered. And right now, what mattered was staying steady. By lunch, the cafeteria was a pressure cooker, the usual clatter of trays and chatter, overlaid with a sharper edge. Jada sat at the same table as the day before her tray, simple, her posture relaxed but alert. Ethan hesitated before joining her, sliding into a seat a few spots away, his tray untouched as he fiddled with his fork. "It's all anyone's talking about," he said, finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Jada glanced at him, her expression neutral, but not unkind. "Let them talk," she said, taking a bite of her apple. Ethan swallowed his fingers, tapping nervously. "They're saying stuff about you. Bad stuff. Taylor's making it worse." Jada's eyes flicked toward the other side of the cafeteria, where Taylor sat with her crew, her laughter loud and forced. "She's scared," Jada said simply, her voice calm. Ethan blinked, confused. "Scared? Of you?" Jada didn't answer directly, just gave a small nod, her eyes steady. "People like her need everyone else to be small. I'm not." Ethan stared at her, the words sinking in, stirring something he hadn't felt in years, hope, maybe, or the beginning of it. Across the room, Taylor was losing her grip. The video had turned her into a caricature, her smirk mocked in memes, her power questioned in group chats. She needed to hit back, to make Jada break, to prove she was still in charge. Her eyes landed on a group of younger students at a nearby table, their phones out, their laughter too loud. She leaned over, her voice sharp. "What's so funny?" The kids froze, one of them stammering, "Just the video." Taylor's jaw tightened, her fingers curling around her water bottle. "You think she's tough? She's nothing. Keep laughing, and you'll see what happens." The threat was empty, but it worked. The kids quieted their phones, disappearing into their pockets. But the victory felt hollow. Taylor's eyes darted to Jada, who was eating calmly, talking quietly with Ethan, her presence a silent rebuke. Taylor needed something bigger, something public, something that would erase the video and restore her reign. The opportunity came in history class that afternoon, a double period, where the teacher, Ms. Harper, was known for letting discussions run long. Jada sat near the middle, her notebook open, her pen moving as Ms. Harper lectured about the civil rights movement. Taylor sat a few rows back. Her crew spread out around her, their eyes flicking between Jada and their phones. The discussion turned to courage, to standing up against injustice, and Ms. Harper called on students to share their thoughts. When Jada raised her hand, the room went quiet, the weight of the video hanging over them. "Courage isn't always loud," Jada said, her voice steady, but not forceful. Sometimes it's choosing not to fight when everyone expects you to. It's knowing you could, but you don't. The words landed like a stone in still water ripples spreading through the room. Ms. Harper nodded impressed, but before she could respond, Taylor's voice cut in sharp and mocking. "That's just a fancy way of saying you're scared," she said, leaning back in her chair, her smirk back in place. The room tensed, students glancing between Jada and Taylor, phones already angled to catch what came next. Jada turned slightly, her eyes meeting Taylor's, her expression calm but piercing. "If I was scared, I'd be loud like you," she said, her voice even almost gentle. The class erupted in gasps, a few students stifling laughter. Taylor's face flushed, her smirk vanishing as she leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of her desk. "You think you're better than me?" she snapped, her voice rising. Jada didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. "I don't have to think it," she said, her words simple but sharp, cutting through Taylor's bravado like a blade. Ms. Harper stepped in, her voice firm. "That's enough, both of you." But the damage was done. Taylor's crew looked uneasy, their eyes darting away while the rest of the class buzzed with whispers. Jada turned back to her notebook, her pen moving again as if the exchange hadn't happened. Ethan, sitting 2 rows over, stared at her, his heart pounding. He'd never seen anyone stand up to Taylor like that, not with fists or shouts, but with words that hit harder than either. After class, the hallway was a storm of chatter, students recounting the moment, some exaggerating Jada's words, others mimicking Taylor's flustered reaction. Ethan caught up with Jada near the lockers, his voice low but urgent. "You didn't have to say anything, but you did." "Why?" Jada paused, adjusting her backpack, her eyes scanning the hallway before meeting his. "Because she's not the only one watching," she said. "You are, and others like you." Ethan blinked, the words sinking in, making his chest tighten with something he couldn't name. Before he could respond, a girl named Mia approached, her voice hesitant. "I saw what happened in the cafeteria," she said, glancing over her shoulder. I think it's cool how you didn't let her get to you." Jada gave a small nod, not quite a smile. "Thanks," she said, her voice warm but guarded. Mia hesitated, then added, "Taylor's been awful to a lot of us. Just be careful." Jada's eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. "I always am." By the end of the day, the school felt different, the air charged with a new kind of tension. Jada's calm had become a weapon one Taylor couldn't counter with insults or coffee cups. In the parking lot after school, Ethan walked beside Jada, his steps quicker to keep up with her steady pace. "They're not going to stop talking about you," he said, his voice a mix of awe and worry. Jada glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Good," she said simply. "Let them." As they reached the edge of the lot, Ethan noticed a few students watching from a distance, their phones out, their whispers carrying on the breeze. Taylor was there too, leaning against her car, her arms crossed, her eyes burning with a mix of anger and desperation. Jada didn't look her way, but she felt the stare, felt the weight of what was coming. Taylor wasn't done, not by a long shot, and Jada knew it. But she also knew something Taylor didn't control wasn't one with noise or cruelty. It was one with patience, with precision, with the kind of strength that didn't need to be proven until the moment was right. And that moment, Jada sensed, was closer than anyone realized. The air at Crestwood High had thickened by the third day, heavy with the weight of whispers, glances, and the unspoken promise of something inevitable. Jada Carter walked through the hallways with the same measured steps, her braids swaying slightly, her backpack slung over one shoulder, but the school around her felt like a storm waiting to break. The video of Taylor Reed pouring coffee over Jada's head, had metastasized, shared and reshared across platforms, the comments growing sharper, more personal. Some called Jada a coward for not fighting back. Others hailed her as untouchable, and a growing number leaned into Taylor's rumors, painting Jada as an outsider who didn't belong, her blackness a silent undercurrent in their words. The social hierarchy of Crestwood, once rigid under Taylor's rule, was cracking, and the tension was palpable in every corner of the school. Students moved with a mix of caution and excitement, their phones always at the ready, sensing that the next moment could be bigger than the last. Jada felt it all, the stares, the whispers, the way conversations hushed when she passed. But she kept her focus forward, her eyes scanning the crowd with the precision of someone who'd spent years reading opponents in the dojang. She wasn't here to win a popularity contest, but she wasn't here to lose herself either. Taylor Reed, meanwhile, was spiraling. Her usual spot by the lockers felt less like a throne and more like a cage. Her crew's laughter quieter, their loyalty fraying at the edges. She'd spent the previous night scrolling through the latest posts, her stomach twisting at the memes mocking her flushed face in history class, the way Jada's calm words, "I don't have to think," it had turned her into a punchline. Taylor had built her power on fear, on the way students shrank when she walked by. But Jada's refusal to shrink was unraveling it all. She needed to hit harder to make Jada break, to prove that Crestwood was still hers. Her fingers drummed against her phone as she leaned against the lockers, her eyes locked on Jada as she passed. "She's not special," Taylor muttered, her voice sharp but unsteady. Kaylee, her ever-loyal shadow, nodded, but the others in her crew exchanged glances, their silence louder than their usual agreement. "She's just playing tough," Kaylee said, trying to bolster Taylor's confidence, but the words felt hollow even to her. Taylor's jaw tightened, her mind racing for a way to reclaim control. She needed something public, something humiliating, something that would erase Jada's calm and restore her own. Ethan trailed a few steps behind Jada, his hoodie pulled up, his glasses slipping down his nose. He'd spent the night thinking about her words in history class, the way she'd turned Taylor's taunt back on her without raising her voice. Ethan knew what it was like to be a target. Years of Taylor's insults, shoves, and laughter had left him quiet, always bracing for the next hit. But Jada was different. She didn't just endure. She controlled the moment, and that control was something Ethan wanted to understand. He caught up to her near the water fountain, his voice low. "They're talking about you even more now," he said, glancing over his shoulder. Jada didn't slow her pace, her eyes flicking toward him briefly. "Let them," she said, her voice steady. Ethan hesitated, then pushed on. "Taylor's not going to stop. She's different this time. Angrier." Jada's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Good," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Angry people make mistakes." Ethan blinked, her words sinking in, stirring a mix of awe and unease. He wanted to ask more, but the bell rang and the hallway surged with movement, pulling them toward their next class. In English class, the tension followed them, the room buzzing with whispers, as students settled into their seats. Jada took her usual spot near the middle, her notebook open, her pen, moving steadily as the teacher, Mr. Coleman, started a discussion on identity in literature. The air was thick with unspoken drama students glancing between Jada and Taylor, who sat a few rows back, her arms crossed, her eyes burning with intent. "Mr. Coleman called on Jada to share her thoughts, and she spoke calmly, her voice clear. "Identity isn't just what you show," she said. "It's what you choose to hold on to, even when people try to take it from you." The words landed heavily, the room going quiet, as students processed the weight behind them. Taylor scoffed loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's cute. she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Sounds like something you'd say when you're too scared to actually do anything. The class tensed, phones subtly angled to catch the moment. Mr. Coleman frowned, but before he could intervene, Jada turned slightly, her eyes meeting Taylor's. "Scared people lash out," she said, her voice even almost gentle. "Like you're doing now." The room erupted in gasps, a few students stifling laughter as Taylor's face reddened, her hands gripping her desk. Mr. Coleman's voice cut through the noise. "Enough. We're here to learn, not perform." But the moment had already shifted the room. Jada's calm once again exposing Taylor's fragility. Outside the classroom, the hallway was a storm of chatter, students recounting Jada's words, some mimicking Taylor's flustered reaction, others debating what Jada meant. Ethan caught up with Jada as they headed to lunch, his voice urgent. "You're making her look weak," he said, his eyes wide. "She's not gonna let that slide." Jada glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "She's already slipping," she said. "She just doesn't know it yet." Ethan swallowed the weight of her words settling in. He'd seen Taylor's cruelty up close, her ability to turn a single moment into a campaign of humiliation, but Jada's confidence was something new. Something he didn't fully understand, but wanted to believe in. As they reached the cafeteria, a girl named Mia joined them, her steps hesitant. "I heard what you said in class," she said, her voice low. "It was brave." Jada gave a small nod, her eyes softening. "Thanks," she said. Mia hesitated, then added, "Taylor's been awful to me since freshman year. Just watch your back." Jada's voice was steady. "I always do." The cafeteria was a pressure cooker, the usual clatter of trays and chatter overlaid with a sharper edge. Jada sat at her usual table, her tray simple, her posture relaxed, but alert. Ethan slid into a seat nearby, his hands fidgeting with his fork. Mia joined them, her presence tentative but deliberate, like she was testing the waters. The three of them formed an unlikely trio, bound by the shared weight of Taylor's attention. Across the room, Taylor sat with her crew, her laughter loud, but strained her eyes darting toward Jada's table. The video had done its damage, but Taylor wasn't done. She needed something bigger, something that would break Jada's calm and restore her own power. Her eyes landed on a group of younger students, their phones out their laughter too loud. She leaned over, her voice sharp. "What's so funny?" The kids froze, one of them stammering, "Just stuff online." Taylor's jaw tightened. "Keep laughing and you'll regret it." She snapped her threat, empty but effective. The kids quieted their phones, disappearing, but the victory felt hollow. Taylor's gaze shifted back to Jada, who was talking quietly with Ethan and Mia, her presence a silent challenge. After lunch, the tension spilled over into something uglier. Jada returned to her locker to find it vandalized. Her books scattered on the floor, pages torn, and a note taped to the door with a single word scrawled in Sharpie, "Outsider." The hallway went quiet, as students gathered their phones out, capturing the scene. Jada knelt to gather her books, her movements slow and deliberate, her face unreadable. Ethan stood nearby, his hands clenched, his voice low. "This is Taylor's doing," he said, his eyes darting to the crowd. Jada didn't look up, her voice calm. "I know." Mia stepped forward, her voice shaking. "This is too far," she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "She can't keep doing this." Jada stood, her books neatly stacked, her eyes scanning the crowd before landing on the note. She tore it down, crumpling it in her hand without a word. The gesture was small, but powerful. The crowd murmuring as she walked away, Ethan and Mia trailing behind her. The note wasn't just about her, it was a message, a reminder of the lines drawn in Crestwood lines that marked her as different as other. But Jada had faced those lines before, in dojos and classrooms and neighborhoods, where her presence was questioned, and she'd learned to cross them without losing herself. In the afternoon, during gym class, the tension boiled over. The class was outside on the soccer field, the air warm and heavy, the students divided into teams for a casual game. Jada moved with the same precision she brought to everything, her athleticism subtle but undeniable. Taylor on the opposing team saw her chance. She played aggressively, her tackles harder than necessary, her eyes locked on Jada. When the ball came Jada's way, Taylor charged her shoulders, slamming into Jada's side with enough force to knock most players down. But Jada didn't fall. She pivoted her balance perfect, her body moving like water around Taylor's aggression. The crowd of students watching from the sidelines gasped their phones out, capturing the moment. Taylor stumbled, her face flushed with anger, and charged again this time, aiming for a blatant foul. Jada sidestepped effortlessly, her movements fluid, almost effortless, leaving Taylor sprawling in the grass. The sidelines erupted, laughter, shouts, a mix of awe and disbelief. Taylor scrambled to her feet, her face burning, her voice sharp. "You think you're slick," she snapped, stepping closer. Jada, it met her gaze, her voice calm. "I think you're trying too hard." The words cut deeper than any tackle, and Taylor's hands clenched, her body trembling with rage. The gym teacher blew his whistle, calling the game to a halt, but the damage was done. The crowd buzzed phones, still recording the moment, already spreading through group chats. Ethan and Mia stood nearby, their eyes wide. "She's gonna lose it," Ethan whispered, his voice a mix of fear and excitement. Mia nodded, her voice low. "She already is." Jada walked off the field, her breathing steady, her expression unchanged. But inside, she felt the weight of what was happening. Taylor's attacks were no longer just about control. They were personal, laced with the kind of venom that came from fear and prejudice. Jada had faced it before, the way her blackness made her a target, the way her calm was seen as a challenge. But she'd also learned that strength wasn't just in fighting back. It was in choosing when and how. As the class ended, Ethan caught up with her, his voice urgent. "You're not scared of her, are you?" Jada glanced at him, her eyes steady. "I'm not scared of anyone," she said. "But I'm not here to play her game either." That evening, in the quiet of the school's library, Jada sat with Ethan and Mia, their books spread out but untouched. The library was a safe haven, a place where the noise of the school felt distant. Ethan finally spoke, his voice hesitant. "Taylor's done stuff to me for years, made me feel like nothing. How do you not let it get to you?" Jada leaned back, her eyes thoughtful. "It gets to me," she said, her voice soft but honest. "But I learned a long time ago that people like her want you to break. They want you to react so they can feel big. I don't give them that." Ethan nodded, his hands fidgeting. "Can you teach me that? How to not break?" Jada studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Meet me here tomorrow after school. Bring Mia. We'll start with the basics." Ethan blinked, a spark of hope in his eyes. Mia smiled, her voice quiet. "You're different, Jada. I'm glad you're here." Jada's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Me too," she said, her voice steady but warm. As they left the library, the school felt different. The air charged with the promise of something bigger. Taylor's power was slipping, and Jada's presence was the reason. But Jada knew it wasn't over. Taylor's desperation was growing, her attacks more reckless, and the next move would be bigger than a note or a tackle. Jada felt it coming, the way she felt an opponent's energy in the dojang, and she was ready. She wasn't here to start a fight, but she wasn't here to lose one either. And as she walked home, the weight of Crestwood's stares and whispers behind her. She knew the real battle was just beginning. The tension at Crestwood High had reached a breaking point, the air thick with anticipation as the week drew to a close. The school was a pressure cooker, its hallways and classrooms buzzing with the fallout of Jada Carter's quiet defiance and Taylor Reed's unraveling control. The video of the coffee incident had been overshadowed by newer clips. Jada's calm retort in history class, her effortless dodge on the soccer field, each one chipping away at Taylor's carefully constructed reign. Social media amplified every moment, turning Jada into a symbol of resistance and Taylor into a cautionary tale. Students whispered in clusters, their phones glowing with screenshots and memes, their voices a mix of awe, fear, and excitement. The balance of power at Crestwood was shifting, and everyone could feel it, from the freshmen who'd once cowered under Taylor's gaze to the teachers who pretended not to notice the undercurrent of drama. Jada walked through the hallways with the same steady pace, her braids, neat her backpack, slung over one shoulder, but her presence carried a new weight. She wasn't just the new girl anymore. She was a force, one that Taylor couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried. Taylor was coming apart at the seams. Her usual spot by the lockers felt like a stage where she was no longer the star. Her crew's laughter forced their eyes darting nervously when she spoke. She'd spent the night scrolling through the latest posts, her chest tight with rage as she read comments calling her weak, desperate, a bully who'd finally met her match. The note on Jada's locker, the tackle on the soccer field, none of it had worked. Jada's calm was a wall Taylor couldn't break, and the more she tried, the smaller she felt. Her friends were pulling back their loyalty, crumbling under the weight of her failures. Kaylee still followed her lead, but even her support felt hollow, her smiles too quick, her agreement too eager. Taylor needed a win, something big, something public, that would shatter Jada's composure and restore her own. She'd heard the whispers about Jada teaching Ethan and Mia basics in the library, and the thought of Jada building a following her own crew made Taylor's blood boil. She needed to end this, and she needed to do it now. Jada, meanwhile, moved through the day with the same quiet focus, her eyes scanning the crowd with the precision of a Taekwondo fighter reading an opponent. She felt the tension building, the way students watched her, the way Taylor's glare followed her from every corner. She wasn't naive. She knew Taylor was planning something, and she knew it would be bigger than a note or a shove. But Jada was ready. Years of training had taught her to stay calm until the moment called for action, to channel her energy with precision rather than rage. In the library the previous evening, she'd shown Ethan and Mia how to stand their ground, simple stances, basic blocks, not to fight, but to feel steady. Ethan had been hesitant, his movements awkward, but Mia had taken to it with a quiet determination, her eyes bright with something new. It's not about hitting, Jada had told them, her voice firm but kind. It's about knowing you can. Ethan had nodded, his glasses slipping down his nose, and for the first time he'd stood a little taller. Mia had smiled, her voice soft. You're teaching us to be like you. Jada had shaken her head. I'm teaching you to be yourselves. By Friday afternoon, the school was restless, the energy spilling over into every classroom and hallway. In the cafeteria at lunch, Jada sat with Ethan and Mia, their table a small island of calm in a sea of noise. Ethan was quieter than usual, his hands fidgeting with his tray. Everyone's waiting for something to happen, he said, his voice low. Mia nodded, her eyes darting toward Taylor's table. She's been too quiet today. That's not like her. Jada took a bite of her apple, her expression unreadable. She's planning, she said simply. Let her. Ethan blinked, his voice urgent. You're not worried. She's gonna come for you, Jada. Hard. Jada's eyes met his, steady and calm. "She already has," she said, "and she's still losing." Across the room, Taylor sat with her crew, her laughter loud but brittle, her eyes locked on Jada's table. She'd heard about the library sessions, the way Jada was drawing others in, and it felt like a betrayal not just of her power, but of the way Crestwood was supposed to work. She leaned toward Kaylee, her voice low. "Gym class. That's where it ends." Kaylee nodded, her smile nervous. "You sure?" Taylor's jaw tightened. "I'm done playing." The gym class that afternoon was held in the main gymnasium, a cavernous space with polished floors and bleachers packed with students who'd heard the rumors of a showdown. The air was electric, the usual chatter replaced by a restless hum as students filed in, their phones already out their eyes, darting between Jada and Taylor. The teacher, Coach Daniels, was running late, leaving the gym unsupervised for a few precious minutes, a perfect stage for what was coming. Jada stood near the sidelines, her gym clothes simple, her posture relaxed but alert. Ethan and Mia lingered nearby, their faces tense with worry. "You don't have to do this," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking. Jada glanced at him, her eyes steady. "I'm not doing anything," she said. "She is." Across the gym, Taylor paced her sneakers, squeaking against the floor, her hands clenching and unclenching. Her crew flanked her, but their support felt thin, their eyes darting nervously as the crowd grew. The bleachers were packed, students, whispering, phones raised the air, thick with anticipation. Taylor stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" she said, her tone sharp with anger. Jada turned to face her, her expression calm, her body still. "I think you're wasting your time," she said, her voice even echoing the words she'd used in the cafeteria. The crowd murmured the familiarity of the phrase, sending a ripple through the gym. Taylor's face flushed, her hands trembling with rage. She needed Jada to break, to fight, to give her something she could use. "You're nothing," Taylor snapped, stepping closer, her voice rising. "You don't belong here, and you know it." The words were laced with venom, the kind that went beyond schoolyard taunts, hitting at Jada's identity, her blackness, her place in Crestwood's world. The crowd went quiet, the weight of the insult hanging in the air. Ethan tensed, his hands clenched, while Mia's eyes widened, her breath catching. Jada didn't flinch. She met Taylor's gaze, her eyes cold but not angry, steady but not cruel. "You don't get to decide where I belong," she said, her voice clear, cutting through the silence. The crowd shifted, phones still recording, but the energy had changed. Taylor's face twisted, her control slipping. She lunged, her fist swinging wildly, driven by desperation more than skill. The crowd gasped, but Jada moved like water, her body flowing out of the way with effortless grace. Taylor stumbled, her momentum carrying her forward, but she caught herself and swung again. Her movements clumsy, fueled by raw fury. Jada sidestepped once more, her balance perfect, her hands loose at her sides. She didn't strike back, didn't raise her fists, she didn't need to. The third time Taylor charged, Jada caught her wrist, mid-swing, her grip firm, but controlled, twisting just enough to send a sharp jolt through Taylor's arm. The crack of straining tendons echoed in the gym, followed by Taylor's sharp cry, as she dropped to her knees, clutching her wrist. Her face twisted in pain and disbelief. The gym went silent. The crowd frozen, phones still raised, but forgotten. Taylor's crew stepped back, their loyalty dissolving in the face of her defeat. Jada stood tall, her breathing steady, her expression unchanged. She hadn't thrown a punch, hadn't raised her voice. She'd simply acted, her Taekwondo training guiding her with precision and restraint. Ethan's mouth hung open, his glasses slipping down his nose while Mia's eyes shone with awe. Taylor groaned, tears mixing with the sweat on her face. Her once proud defiance shattered in front of everyone. The crowd whispered, the sound growing into a wave as students processed what they'd seen, not a brawl, but a dismantling Jada's calm strength, exposing Taylor's fragility in a way no fight could have. Coach Daniels burst into the gym, his voice booming. "What's going on here?" he shouted, his eyes darting between Jada and Taylor. The crowd scattered, phones disappearing as students rushed for the exits. But the moment was already immortalized, destined to spread faster than the coffee video ever had. Jada stepped back, her hands loose at her sides, her eyes meeting Coach Daniels's. "She came at me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I defended myself." Taylor, still on her knees, couldn't speak, her breath hitching as she held her wrist. Coach Daniels's face hardened, but there was a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He'd seen enough of Crestwood's dynamics to know what had led to this. "Both of you to the principal's office," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Jada nodded, picking up her backpack, her movements as steady as ever. Ethan and Mia followed her, their steps quick, their faces a mix of awe and worry. As they left the gym, the whispers swelled, students already sharing the clip. The comments flooding in, some praising Jada. Others shocked, a few still clinging to Taylor's side, but fewer than before. In the principal's office, the air was heavy, the blinds half-drawn, sunlight slicing across the desk, where Ms. Larson sat, her hands folded, her expression stern. Jada sat to the left, her posture calm, while Taylor slouched to the right, her wrist wrapped in a temporary bandage, her eyes burning with resentment. Ethan and Mia sat in the corner as witnesses, their presence quiet but attentive. Ms. Larson leaned forward, her voice measured. "This cannot continue," she said. "The videos, the fights, the disruptions, it's tearing this school apart. I don't care who started what. If this happens again, there will be suspensions, expulsions, consequences you won't like." "Do I make myself clear?" Taylor smirked, but it was weak, her usual bravado gone. "She attacked me," she muttered, her voice bitter. Jada's eyes flicked toward her, steady and unyielding. "You attacked me," she said, her voice calm. "I stopped you." Ms. Larson's eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. She'd seen the videos, heard the stories, and knew the truth was somewhere in Jada's favor. "You're both on thin ice," she said. "Jada, you're suspended for 3 days. Taylor, you'll face your own consequences. This ends now." Jada nodded, accepting the punishment without protest. Taylor's jaw tightened, but she said nothing, her silence a defeat louder than any words. As they left the office, Ethan caught up with Jada, his voice low. "You didn't even hit her," he said, his eyes wide. "You just stopped her." Jada glanced at him, her lips twitching, not quite a smile. "Sometimes that's enough," she said. Mia joined them, her voice soft but firm. "You changed everything, Jada. People aren't scared of her anymore." Jada paused, her eyes thoughtful. "I didn't come here to change anything," she said. "I came here to be me. But if she's done hurting people like you, then that's enough." Ethan swallowed, his chest tight with something new. Gratitude, maybe? Or the beginning of courage? "How do you do it?" he asked. "Stay so strong, even when it's hard." Jada looked at him, her eyes steady but warm. "It's not about being strong," she said. "It's about knowing who you are and not letting anyone take that away. I learned that in the dojang, but it works everywhere. You can learn it too." As they walked out of the school, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the parking lot, Jada felt the weight of the day settle into her bones. She'd faced worse than Taylor Stare's slurs moments that tested her more than a thrown punch ever could. But she'd learned to hold on to herself, to channel her anger and fear into something steady, something unbreakable. She glanced at Ethan and Mia, their steps lighter, their faces brighter than they'd been days ago. "You don't have to be scared anymore," she said, her voice quiet, but certain. "Not of her, not of anyone." Ethan nodded, his hands no longer fidgeting, while Mia smiled, her eyes shining with possibility. The school behind them buzzed with the aftermath, the videos spreading, the whispers growing, but Jada didn't look back. She'd done what she needed to, not for glory, not for revenge, but for the simple truth that no one got to decide her worth. And in that truth, she'd shown Ethan, Mia, and every student watching that strength wasn't in the loudest voice or the hardest hit. It was in standing tall, staying steady, and choosing when to act. As they reached the edge of the lot, the sun dipping low, Jada felt a quiet peace. Crestwood High would never be the same, and neither would she. But that was okay. She'd been ready for this all along.